The first impact was metal, a screaming orchestra of twisting steel. The second was glass, a million diamonds exploding inward. The third and the worst was the silence inside me afterward. A profound, ringing quiet where a heartbeat, two heartbeats used to be. I remember the world tilting, the sickening lurch of the car as the truck ran the red light. I remember my hand instinctively flying to the gentle swell beneath my coat, a shield that was utterly useless. In pain. A white-hot spear through my abdomen and a deeper, more existential tear in the fabric of my soul. Darkness, sticky and warm, pulled at the edges of my vision. But consciousness, a cruel and tenacious thing, flickered. I was pinned, the steering column kissing my chest with intimate, brutal pressure. The smell of gasoline and copper filled the air. My phone miraculously lay on the passenger seat floor, screen cracked but glowing. A lifeline. My fingers, slick with blood, fumbled for it. Every movement was a symphony of agony, but a force stronger than pain drove me. The baby. Our baby. The 12-week secret I was planning to reveal over a romantic dinner tonight with a little pair of booties. Arjun had been distant, stressed with a major corporate deal, but I'd dreamed this news would bridge the growing chasm between us. I tapped his contact photo, a picture I'd taken of him laughing on our honeymoon in Goa, his eyes crinkled at the corners. Pray. Once, twice, a lifeline stretching across the city. Then his voicemail. Hey, you've reached Arjun. Busy conquering the world. Leave a message. His cheerful, recorded voice was a slap. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the haze. I called again. And again. Each unanswered ring was a drop of ice water down my spine. Between calls, I whispered to the tiny life inside me, promises choked with blood and tears. Hold on, my love. Daddy's coming. He'll come. I lost count of the calls. The world narrowed to the glowing screen, the rhythmic pain and the fading pulse of hope. With each sent to voicemail, my pleas grew more desperate in my own head, but my voice, when I could muster it, grew weaker. Accident, please, I whispered to the electronic void. I imagined him in a boardroom, phone on silent, immersed in the deal that would secure our future. I clung to that image. The devoted husband, the soon-to-be father, who would be shattered to know he missed this. He'd rush in, tearful, furious at himself, and his love would make the pain bearable. But as call number 47 went unanswered, a different, colder image intruded. The late nights. The new cologne that wasn't my gift. The way his phone now always faced down. The team dinner that had lasted until 4 a.m. Oh, I pushed the thought away. He was my Arjun. The man who'd proposed in a rainstorm because he couldn't wait for the sun. He was just busy. He'd call back. Call 55. My thumb, painted in a macabre crimson polish, pressed the screen. I held it to my ear, my breath a shallow, ragged thing. Ray. And then a click. Not voicemail. A connection. My heart stuttered. Arj, I croaked. But it wasn't his voice that filled my ear. It was a melodic, unfamiliar laugh, bright and carefree. Background noise. The soft murmur of a luxury store, a clinking hanger. Arjun, darling, stop fussing. Do you like the sapphire blue or the crimson on me? For our anniversary party. And his voice, clear as crystal, laced with an affection I hadn't heard in months. Get both, Ria. You look stunning in everything. But the blue, it matches your eyes. The world didn't go black. It went white. A blinding, silent void where every nerve, every feeling was incinerated. The pain in my body was suddenly a distant echo. The only reality was that sound. His voice, tender and preoccupied, in a world of dresses and mistresses while my world ended in a symphony of crushing metal. I didn't hear the rest. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. The laugh, his voice, they looped in my skull, a hellish soundtrack. Sirens finally wailed in the distance, but they sounded like they were coming from another universe. The last thing I felt before the darkness finally took me whole was not the agony of my shattered bones, but a distinct, separate sensation deep within. A letting go. A tiny, silent farewell. Then nothing. I surfaced in fragments. The sterile smell of antiseptic. The beeping of monitors. The blurry, kind face of a nurse. You're in the hospital, my dear. You've been in an accident. You're going to be okay. My throat was sandpaper. I tried to speak, to ask the only question that mattered, but my vocal cords wouldn't obey. My hand drifted trembling to my stomach. It was flatter, wrapped in bandages, but hollow in a way no wound could explain. A deep, guttural sound escaped me, not a sob, but the raw scrape of a soul being torn out. The nurse's eyes filled with pity. She took my hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "We couldn't save the pregnancy." The words were final. A death sentence. My baby, our baby, the secret joy I'd carried. Gone. Extinguished while my husband debated dress colors. A doctor came, explained the extent of my injuries. 2 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, a severe concussion, internal bruising. The physical trauma was severe but recoverable. He spoke of grief counseling, of taking time. All I heard was the laugh. "Get both, Ria." 3 days. I lay there for 3 days. I didn't cry. The well was dry, filled with ashes. I ate when fed, drank when prompted, spoke not a single word. I was a vessel of pure, silent ruin. The police came, asked questions. I gave monotone answers. A kind social worker visited. I stared at the wall. And I waited. In some deep, shattered part of me, the part that still remembered the rain-soaked proposal, I waited for him. For the explanation, the breakdown, the torrent of regret. He would walk in, destroyed, and the magnitude of his remorse would be the only thing potent enough to match my loss. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I heard his voice in the hallway. Not the tender tone from the phone, but a sharp, commanding one. "Yes, I'm looking for my wife, Nisha Roy. There was an accident. I just heard. Why wasn't I notified immediately?" My heart, a broken thing, gave a single painful thud. He was here. The moment had arrived. The nurse directed him to my room. His footsteps approached. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, on a sliver of gray sky. The door opened. He rushed in. I could see him in my periphery. Arjun, my handsome husband, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, his hair slightly disheveled, his face a mask of performative panic. It didn't reach his eyes. They scanned the room, landed on me, widened with a shock that seemed theatrical. "Nisha. My God, look at you." He moved to the bedside, reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but my fingers lay limp and cold in his. His touch felt like a contamination. I came as soon as I got the message from the police. I was out of network in back-to-back meetings. "I'm so sorry, my love." Out of network. Meetings. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. He'd had 3 days to polish them. Before I could speak, and what would I say? What words existed for this? The doctor entered, clipboard in hand. He gave Arjun a professional, polite nod. "Mr. Roy? I'm Dr. Kapoor. I've been overseeing your wife's care." Arjun straightened, slipping into his CEO persona. "Doctor. Tell me everything. How is she? Will she recover fully?" The doctor's gaze flickered to me, a silent question of permission. I gave a barely perceptible nod. Let him hear it. Let him hear it from a stranger. Mrs. Roy's physical injuries are serious but not life-threatening. With rest and rehabilitation, she should make a full physical recovery. The doctor paused, his voice softening with a genuine empathy that made Arjun's performance seem grotesque. "However, there's something else you need to know. The accident, it induced a traumatic miscarriage. I'm very sorry. We were unable to save the baby." The room froze. Arjun's hand, still holding mine, went rigid. The color drained from his face, not in a slow fade but in a sudden, shocking wash. His performative panic evaporated, replaced by a genuine, stupefied blankness. His mouth opened slightly but no sound came out. He looked from the doctor to my flat stomach, then to my face. I finally turned my head to look at him fully. I let him see my eyes. There were no tears, no accusations. Just a vast, empty, glacial plain. A landscape after a fire. "Baby," he finally whispered, the word brittle. What baby?" And in that moment I saw it. Not just the shock, but the dawning, horrifying realization of his own monumental, irreversible failure. He hadn't just missed an accident. He'd missed a lifetime. He'd been shopping for dresses while his child died. He stumbled back a step, releasing my hand as if it had burned him. "Nisha. You didn't tell me." The doctor, misinterpreting his shock as grief, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your wife has been through an immense trauma. She's been here alone for 3 days. She will need tremendous support." Alone for 3 days. The words hung in the air, a verdict. Arjun looked like a man who had walked off a cliff and was just realizing there was no ground beneath his feet. His facade was in ruins, showing the hollow, guilty man beneath. He reached for me again, his eyes pleading. "Nisha, please." But I had seen the truth. I had heard the laugh. The love I had for him, the love that had persisted through his distance, died in that moment with a finality that was more absolute than the loss I'd already suffered. It didn't hurt. It just turned to stone. I looked past him to the doctor. My voice, when it came, was flat, calm, and carried a quiet, unshakable authority I didn't know I possessed. "Doctor, when can I be discharged?" Arjun stared at me, frozen in his new, desolate reality. The revenge had begun, not with a scream, but with a silence he could never hope to fill. And I knew, as I looked at his shattered expression, that his punishment was not anything I would have to enact. It was the life he would now have to live, knowing exactly what his choices had cost. And I would not be in it. The silence in the wake of the doctor's words was thicker than the fog of anesthesia. It was a living thing, feeding on Arjun's disbelief and my own glacial stillness. I watched him unravel. It was a clinical observation, as if I were watching a specimen under glass. The minute twitch in his jaw, the frantic darting of his eyes as they tried to avoid the damning evidence of my body and my face, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "A baby," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "Nisha, why didn't you?" My gaze didn't waver. I let the question hang, absurd and offensive in the sterile air. "Why didn't you tell me?" The unspoken answer screamed from the machines, from my bandages, from the void inside me. "I tried. 55 times. Dr. Kapoor, uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "The psychological trauma is significant. She hasn't spoken much. Shock is a common response. I'll give you both a moment, but we need to discuss discharge plans and follow-up care." He gave a curt nod and left, the door sighing shut behind him. It was just us. The husband and the ghost of his wife. Arjun moved then, a jerky, stumbling motion. He fell into the visitor's chair by my bed, his head dropping into his hands. For a long moment he was silent, his shoulders hunched. I waited. I was good at waiting now. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. The performance was back, but it was cracked, less convincing. Raw guilt oozed through the seams. "I got Nisha." "Oh, can't even. What happened?" "The police said a truck ran a red light." "Are you, the baby was really?" He couldn't say it. I didn't help him. I just continued to look at him, my face a placid mask. Inside, however, a new process had begun. The white-hot void was cooling, hardening into something sharp and purposeful. Every word he said was being collected, examined, and filed away in a new, cold chamber of my mind. "I was going to tell you that night," I said, my voice a dry rustle of leaves. It was the first complete sentence I'd uttered in days. "I'd made your favorite, lamb biryani. I'd bought little booties. They were in my purse." I paused, letting him picture it. The cozy dinner, the reveal, the joy. The truck hit the driver's side. The purse was thrown. I don't know where the booties are. Each detail was a carefully placed pin. I saw them land, saw him flinch. He reached for my hand again. I let him take it. His skin was warm, clammy. Mine was cold. "I'm so sorry. I was with a client. A crucial one. My phone was on silent, I must have missed." The lie died in his throat as he looked into my eyes. He saw that I knew. The certainty in my gaze was absolute. He changed tack, desperation bleeding into his tone. "It doesn't matter. Nothing matters but you now. You're alive. We can get through this. We can try again. I'll be here for you, I promise. I'll take care of everything." The word was a mockery. Try again. As if our child was a lost set of keys. A cold fury, pure and silent, solidified in my chest. But I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I'm tired," I whispered, turning my head back to the window. He took the dismissal, eager to escape the prison of my gaze. "Rest. Well, I'll go talk to the doctor. Sort out the bills. Don't worry about a thing." He stood, his movements awkward. He leaned down as if to kiss my forehead, but hesitated, straightened, and fled. The moment the door closed, I moved. Pain shrieked through my ribs and abdomen, a brutal reminder of my physical reality. I ignored it. The social worker had left a booklet. I found the number for a private nurse agency. Using the hospital phone, my voice steady and detached, I arranged for 24/7 care at his apartment for 2 weeks. I gave them his corporate insurance details. Then I called the most discreet, expensive lawyer I knew of, a shark named Mrs. Mehta recommended by an old college friend who'd gone through a vicious divorce. I left a voicemail outlining the bare facts: impending divorce, infidelity, unequal financial footing, trauma. Next I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright. "Beta, how are you?" The sound of her love almost broke the new ice in my veins. I took a shallow breath, careful of my ribs. "Ma, there's been an accident." "I'm okay," I said, preempting the scream I could feel building on the other end. "I'm in the hospital. I was pregnant. I lost the baby." The silence on the line was a void of its own. Then a shattered sob. "Nisha, oh my child. Listen to me, Ma. I need you and Papa to do exactly as I say. Do not call Arjun. Do not come here. I will be discharged in a day or 2. I am going to the apartment but only to collect some things. I will then come home to you in Dehradun. Tell no one. Not even Didi. Not yet. But Arjun? What does he?" "Arjun," I said, the name ash in my mouth, "was shopping for dresses with his mistress when I called him from the wreckage. 55 times. My mother's grief crystallized into something else. I heard it in the sharp intake of breath, in the new steel in her voice when she next spoke. "We will be ready. Your room is always ready." By the time Arjun returned, full of false assurances and plans for my convalescence at home, my own plans were set in motion. I let him talk. I nodded at appropriate intervals. I was the perfect, broken vessel accepting his ministrations. The discharge process was a blur of paperwork and painkillers. Arjun hovered, a portrait of the concerned husband. He helped me into the wheelchair, his touch making my skin crawl. He chatted nervously with the nurse, a stream of inane commentary about hospital food and traffic. I said nothing. The car ride to our luxury high-rise was suffocating. He tried to hold my hand. I kept them folded in my lap, over the hollow that screamed of loss. "The doctor said you need rest and quiet," he said. "I've cleared my schedule. I'll work from home. We'll order. Watch silly movies. Whatever you need." I looked out at the city, at the people living their unshattered lives. "A nurse is coming," I said flatly. "I've arranged it. I don't want to be a burden on you." "A nurse? Nonsense. I'm your husband. It's my job to care for you. You have work," I said, the sentence loaded with all the meanings he feared I knew. "The nurse is a professional. She'll be here around the clock. It's already settled." He was silent, defeated. He couldn't argue without revealing why he might actually want to be away from me. The apartment felt alien. A museum of a life that was already fossilized. The plush white sofas, the abstract art we'd chosen together, the balcony with its view of the sea. It all felt like a stage set. The silence here was different from the hospital's. It was accusatory, filled with the ghosts of our old laughter, our dead dreams. The nurse, a sturdy, no-nonsense woman named Sheila, arrived within the hour. Her presence created a buffer. Arjun floundered in his own home, made redundant by her quiet efficiency. For 2 weeks I endured. I let Sheila tend to my wounds, force nutrition into me, help me walk shakily to the bathroom. I spoke only when necessary. Arjun tiptoed around, bringing me cups of tea I didn't drink, flowers that wilted in their vases. He tried to talk, to explain, to apologize in vague, sweeping terms. I offered no forgiveness, no anger, no engagement. I was a black hole, absorbing his frantic energy and giving back nothing. I observed. I saw the constant anxious checking of his phone when he thought I was asleep. I saw the tightness around his eyes, the weight he was losing. His punishment was not mine to inflict. It was his own conscience, now fully awakened and screaming. The sight of me was his perpetual penance. My body healed, stitch by stitch, bruise by bruise. My mind, however, was a hive of silent activity. I accessed our shared accounts from my laptop, downloading statements. I took pictures of the apartment, of the assets. I found the receipt for a boutique hotel in Lonavala from a weekend he'd claimed was a team-building retreat. I didn't feel a thing. I was an archivist of my own destruction. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange over the sea, he broke. He sat on the edge of the bed, far from me, his head bowed. I know you know, he whispered, his voice ragged. About Ria. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless. It's over. I ended it. The moment I realized. The moment I knew about the baby. He choked. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you, Nisha. I swear on my life. I looked at him, at the man I had loved more than breath. I saw the tears tracking through his stubble, the genuine anguish. And I felt nothing but a distant, analytical pity. His tears were for himself, for the monstrous image of himself he could no longer avoid. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice clear in the twilight. He looked up, hope flaring briefly in his wet eyes. You forgive me? I said, it doesn't matter, I repeated. Your affair. Your apologies. They are irrelevant to me now. The hope died, replaced by confusion and a dawning horror. What does that mean? It meant I was already gone. The next morning, after Sheila had changed my dressings and Arjun had left for a critical meeting, his shoulders tense with the lie, I got to work. Moving slowly, each step a careful negotiation with pain, I packed a single suitcase. Not with the designer clothes he'd bought me, but with old, soft things from the back of the closet, a few books, my passport, my separate bank book, the laptop. I took the small velvet box that held my grandmother's simple gold bangles, the only thing that felt truly mine. I left my wedding and engagement rings on the marble kitchen island, beside the empty fruit bowl. They looked cheap and gaudy in the morning light. I called a taxi. Sheila, her kind eyes understanding more than I'd ever said, helped me downstairs. You take care of yourself, madam, she said, squeezing my hand. Be strong. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the glittering tower. I looked ahead through the grimy window at the sprawling, indifferent city. I was a ghost, a whisper, a woman who had died in that car crash and been reborn hollow. But a hollow vessel can be filled with new things. Cold things. Purposeful things. The first phase was complete. I had vanished from the life he'd shattered. The note I left was simple, written on a sheet of hospital stationery I'd kept. Arjun, the woman you married died in the accident. Do not look for her. My lawyer, Mrs. Mehta, had already filed the initial papers. The game was his to play now, alone in our empty, echoing apartment, with the ghost of a child and the specter of a wife he could never again reach. My revenge was my absence. And it was only the beginning. The taxi smelled of old air freshener and distant cigarettes. Each bump in the road sent a jolt through my healing ribs, a physical metronome keeping time with the frantic beat of my escape. I didn't cry. I watched the city dissolve from glittering high-rises into crowded markets, then finally to the wide, dusty approach of the airport. The driver, a silent man with kind eyes in the rearview mirror, didn't ask questions. He saw the suitcase, the pallor of my face, the way I held myself so carefully, and he simply drove. At the airport I moved like an automaton. Check-in, security, the long walk to the gate. Every uniformed man made my heart stutter. Irrational, the fear that Arjun had already mobilized someone to stop me. But I was a ghost. He would be at his office, or perhaps just arriving home to find Sheila gone and my rings gleaming coldly on the counter. He would read my note. He would freeze again, but this time in a different kind of wreckage. Boarding the flight to Dehradun was like crossing a border into a quieter, gentler world. The hum of the engines was a lullaby. For the first time since the accident, I slept. Not the drugged, chaotic sleep of the hospital, but a deep, dreamless plunge into nothingness. I didn't dream of the crash or of his voice in the boutique. I dreamed of silence. My parents were waiting at the arrival's gate. My mother's face, usually a map of cheerful wrinkles, was carved with new canyons of grief. She took one look at me, thinner, paler, moving with the caution of a brittle-boned bird, and her composure shattered. She pulled me into a hug so fierce it made me gasp in pain, but I didn't pull away. I let her hold me, let her sob into my hair. My father, a stoic retired army colonel, stood rigid beside her, his jaw a hard line, his eyes red-rimmed. He took my suitcase, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight. "Welcome home, Beatty," he said, his voice thick. That was all. It was enough. Their house, my childhood home nestled in the foothills, was a sanctuary of familiar smells. Camp Horwood, old books, my mother's rose attar. My old room was untouched, a time capsule of a happier self. Academic trophies, faded posters of mountains, a bookshelf stuffed with well-loved novels. It felt like putting on a skin that no longer fit. For the first week I was a sleepwalker. I ate the healing foods my mother prepared without tasting them. I sat on the veranda, wrapped in a shawl, watching the mist cling to the deodar trees. I spoke only in monosyllables. My parents, guided by some deep instinct, didn't press. They created a cocoon of quiet around me. The physical pain slowly ebbed, replaced by a profound fatigue that felt spiritual. But the hollow space inside me wasn't empty. It was filling drop by cold drop with a new resolve. My grief was no longer a shapeless ocean. It was a tool being sharpened on a whetstone of memory. I began to work. From my old laptop, I accessed the cloud storage where I'd uploaded all the financial documents. I created a new email, anonymous and secure. I contacted Mrs. Mehta, the lawyer. Her responses were crisp, efficient, and devoid of pity. The petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and adultery has been filed and served to his office. He has retained counsel, Agarwal and Sons, predictably aggressive. They are already pushing for mediation, claiming misunderstanding and shared grief. He is contesting. Vehemently. A grim satisfaction curled in my gut. Of course he was contesting. It wasn't about love. It was about control, about the narrative. The powerful, rising CEO with a tragically unstable wife who'd left him after a shared loss wouldn't play well. He needed to be the grieving, wronged husband, or better yet, have me back under his roof where the story could be managed. Mrs. Mehta's next email contained an attachment. He has filed a counter-petition. Claims desertion. Expresses concern for your mental state following the trauma. Requests the court order a psychological evaluation and that you return to the marital home. My hands resting on the keyboard were steady. The cold fury was back, a clean, focused flame. He was using my pain, our child's death, as a legal weapon. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath for a moment. I typed my reply, my fingers striking the keys with deliberate force. Provide them with the discharge summary from the hospital. Date stamped. Highlight the line about informing husband of miscarriage. Then provide my call logs from my mobile carrier for that day. Highlight the 55 calls to his number between the time of the accident and the time the ambulance was called. Let his lawyers explain that to the judge. I could almost hear Mrs. Mehta's shark-like smile through the screen. An excellent suggestion. Will do. But I wasn't done. The apartment was in his name, purchased before our marriage. But the contents, the art, the furnishings, much of it was acquired during our marriage. I had contributed from my own freelance design income. I made a list. A detailed photographic inventory of every item of value. I sent it to Mrs. Mehta. I want my fair share. I want it sold. I don't want a single memory from that place. Next, I turned to the digital world. Arjun and I had shared social media accounts. A power couple facade he'd loved. I had rarely posted. Now I logged in. I changed the password, locking him out. I went to his contacts, his professional network. And I began to carefully, methodically untangle our lives. I didn't post anything dramatic. No accusations. Instead, I changed my marital status to single. I removed all tags of him from photos. I deleted the joint profile picture. I updated my bio to a simple line, rebuilding. Then I logged out, leaving the account as a silent, altered monument. It was a small strike, but a symbolic one. He would notice. His carefully curated image would have a hairline crack. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown Mumbai number. I knew it was him before I answered. The ghost in the machine was calling. I let it ring 3 times, then picked up. I said nothing. Nisha. His voice was a broken thing, raspy with what sounded like genuine despair. Please. Talk to me. Where are you? I remained silent, listening to the static of his breath. I got the papers. And the call logs. Nisha, you have to understand. I didn't see. I was in a fitting room, the signal was bad, the lies were weaker now, pathetic. The sapphire blue or the crimson, Arjun? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Which one did she finally choose? A sharp intake of breath. A long, terrible silence. I had torn away the last pretense. It's over with her. It was nothing. A distraction. I was stressed, I was stupid, He was babbling. But us, our baby, we have to mourn together. We have to help each other. Come home. We can see a counselor. We can try. There is no us, I interrupted, my voice still chillingly calm. There is you, and there is the consequence of your choices. My lawyer will handle the rest. Nisha, don't do this. I love you. I've always loved you. The cry was desperate, clawing. I thought of the 55 calls. I thought of the doctor's words, alone for 3 days. I thought of the hollow place inside me where a heartbeat used to be. You have a strange way of showing it, I said, and ended the call. I blocked the number. Then, methodically, I began blocking him on every platform I could think of. Messaging apps. It was a severing of digital arteries. The next weapon was financial independence. My freelance work had tapered off as Arjun's career had soared, as he'd subtly encouraged me to relax, enjoy life. Now I opened my portfolio. I updated my website. I reached out to old clients with a simple, professional email. After a brief hiatus, I am reopening my design studio and taking on select projects. The responses were slow at first. Then a former client who'd always appreciated my work, offered a small branding job. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was mine. My father watched me one evening as I worked at the dining table, sketches spread around me. Your mother and we can support you, Nisha. For as long as you need. There's no need to rush. I looked up, meeting his steady gaze. I know, Papa. And I'm grateful. But I need to do this. I need to stand on my own. He took almost everything. He doesn't get to take my ability to provide for myself too. My father nodded, a look of grim pride in his eyes. Good. Then we'll help you fight. But remember, Beatty, the best revenge is not just living well but living free. Free. The word echoed. I wasn't free yet. The legal battle loomed. The memories still ambushed me in quiet moments. A scent, a slant of light, the phantom flutter in my abdomen that would never come again. But I was no longer a victim in a hospital bed. I was a strategist in the quiet hills. Arjun was in Mumbai, wrestling with lawyers, with his guilt, with the empty apartment and the mocking silence I'd left behind. He was frozen in the consequences. And I was just beginning to move. The ghost was learning how to haunt in daylight. My revenge was a tapestry I would weave thread by thread. Legal, financial, digital, personal. And the first, most crucial panel was my own reconstruction. Not as Arjun's wife, but as Nisha. Whoever she was now. The call from Mrs. Mehta came a week later. He's offered a settlement. A lump sum. Significantly less than half, but substantial. He wants a quick, quiet divorce. No contest. I looked out at the rain washing over the mountains, cleansing the world. Tell him no, I said, my voice clear. We contest. We go to court. We take everything the law allows. And we take our time. The silence on the other end was approving. It will get ugly. A faint, cold smile touched my lips for the first time in months. Let it. The monsoon mist in Dehradun was a living thing, creeping down from the mountains to blanket the valley in a soft, persistent gray. It matched my internal landscape perfectly. A world muted, blurred at the edges, but teeming with unseen, determined life beneath the surface. My parents' home was no longer just a sanctuary. It had become my command center. The wicker table on the veranda was perpetually strewn with legal documents, sketches for freelance projects and lists. So many lists. Mrs. Mehta's prediction of ugliness materialized with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. Arjun's lawyers, Agarwal and Sons, launched their offensive. They subpoenaed my medical records not just from the accident but from years back, hunting for a history of instability. They filed motion after motion, trying to delay proceedings, to bury us in paperwork and legal fees, hoping to break my resolve or drain my parents' resources. They underestimated Colonel Vikram Roy's pension and his ferocious love for his daughter. And they underestimated Mrs. Mehta, whose icy competence was a force of nature. For every volley they sent, she returned a precise, devastating counter. They've submitted an affidavit from a colleague, Mrs. Mehta said during our now weekly video call, her face a mask of professional disdain on my laptop screen. Rain streaked the window behind me. This colleague claims to have witnessed you having emotional outbursts at corporate events, and states that Mr. Roy was often patient and long-suffering. I felt a flicker of old anxiety, the fear of being perceived as hysterical, difficult. I sipped my ginger tea, letting the warmth center me. Which colleague? A Mr. Varun Khanna, head of marketing at Arjun's firm. I remembered Vern. A sycophant with slicked back hair and a laugh that was a little too loud. He'd once cornered me at a party, slurring about how Arjun needed a trophy wife who knew how to network, not a bookworm who hid in corners. I'd politely excused myself. That was my emotional outburst. I have emails, I said, my voice calm. From about 2 years ago. Vern Khanna sent me inappropriate messages after that party. I forwarded them to Arjun. Arjun told me to ignore him, that Vern was a top performer, and, just like that, I saved them. In a folder labeled Mumbai Toxicity. Would those be helpful? Mrs. Mehta's lips twitched. Extremely. Send them. We'll frame it as a pattern of him fostering a hostile environment and dismissing your concerns. It undermines their witnesses' credibility beautifully. The work was meticulous, draining, and deeply satisfying. It was archaeology of my own oppression. Each email I dug up, each bank statement showing my deposits into our joint account for household expenses, each photograph of me alone at an event he'd promised to attend, they were tiles in a mosaic of quiet betrayal that had predated the final, catastrophic one. My physical strength returned slowly. I started taking short walks, then longer hikes on the forest trails behind the house. The ache in my ribs faded to a dull reminder. The hollow in my belly remained, but I began to fill it with something else. Mountain air, the scent of wet pine, the burn of muscles used for my own purposes. One evening I received a package. No return address, but the Mumbai postmark was like a bruise. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a pair of tiny cream-colored woolen booties. The ones from my purse. There was a note on his heavy monogrammed stationery. Nisha. I found these. The police had them. I thought you should have them. I think about him every day. About you every second. This war you're waging, it's destroying us both. Can't we just talk? The booties were soft in my hands. A wave of grief, so visceral it doubled me over, crashed through my carefully constructed defenses. I could smell the accident in the wool, dust, gasoline, the metallic tang of fear. I wept then, great heaving sobs that had been locked in the frozen vault of me for months. I wept for the child, for the mother I would never be, for the trusting woman I had been. When the storm passed, I was empty again, but cleansed. The booties were not a peace offering. They were a weapon sent to unbalance me. He knew my softest spot. He was probing for a weakness. He would not find one there again. I did not reply. Instead, I placed the booties in a small plain wooden box. I buried the box under the old magnolia tree in the garden, where the blooms in spring were profuse and hopeful. A private funeral. Then I went back inside and composed an email to Mrs. Mehta. Please add emotional harassment to the petition. Cite the unsolicited delivery of items related to the deceased fetus, a clear attempt to manipulate and inflict distress. My revenge was no longer just about absence. It was about documentation. It was about translating every silent hurt, every monstrous action into cold, admissible legalese. I was building a case not just for the court but for history. My history. My freelance work began to gain traction. A former client referred me to a new eco-resort opening in Rishikesh. They wanted branding that reflected strength born from peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. I threw myself into the project. My designs became bolder, cleaner, with deep roots and soaring lines. The client was thrilled. The payment was transferred into my own, separate account. The number in my balance was a different kind of heartbeat. Steady, sustaining, mine. Meanwhile, the digital haunting continued. I created a new, professional Instagram profile. Nisha Roy Designs. Not Nisha A. Roy as I'd once been. Just Nisha Roy. I posted images of my work, of the misty Dehradun mornings, of my hand holding a pencil over a sketchpad. No face, no personal details. Just evidence of a life moving forward. I knew he would find it. One day a follower request popped up. An account with no posts following only one person. Me. The username was a jumble of letters and numbers. I didn't need to sleuth to know. I denied the request and set my profile to private. The next day Mrs. Mehta called, a new edge in her voice. He's made a direct offer to your father. A substantial investment in a veterans charity your father advises, on the condition that he reasons with you to settle. The anger that rose in me was white hot and pure. He was trying to buy my father. To turn my anchor into his leverage. What did Papa say? I asked, my voice tight. According to your father, Mrs. Mehta said, and I could hear the respect in her tone. He told Mr. Arjun Roy that the only thing he was interested in was seeing him in court, and suggested he take his money and hire a better lawyer. A laugh, sharp and unexpected, burst from me. It felt foreign, like the creak of a long-unused door. Good. But the attempt shook me. It showed a new level of desperation, a willingness to attack my support system. I couldn't stay hidden forever, a ghost in the hills. I needed to be more solid, more unassailable. The idea came during a walk. The local women's cooperative, famous for their hand-woven shawls and stoles, had a beautiful product but a fading, outdated presence. I approached them the next day, offering my services pro bono in exchange for being able to list them as a major client. Their chairman, a wise-eyed grandmother named Anjali Devi, listened to my pitch, looked at my portfolio, then took my hands in her rough, capable ones. Child, she said, her voice like rustling leaves, you have sorrow in your eyes and fire in your hands. We accept. Let us weave something new together. The project was a lifeline. It connected me to the earth, to strong women, to creation that was tangible and beautiful. We redesigned their logo, their packaging, their website. I photographed the weavers at their looms, their focused faces, the vibrant threads becoming art. I posted these images. Strength, heritage, resilience. The captions wrote themselves. One afternoon as I was editing photos, my phone rang. A Dehradun number, but unfamiliar. Is this Nisha Roy? A pleasant male voice. Yes. Who is this? Ayan Khurana. I'm a friend of Anjali Devi's. I run a small publishing house here. Mountain Ink. He showed me your work for the cooperative. It's stunning. We're rebranding and frankly our current materials look like they were designed by a depressed badger. Would you be open to a conversation? I was. We met at a quiet cafe. Ayan was probably in his late 30s with kind, intelligent eyes and an easy smile that didn't feel like a demand. He talked about books with a passion that was infectious. He loved the Weavers Project. We discussed design, aesthetics, the soul of a brand. He didn't ask personal questions. He treated me like a professional. It was a novel and exhilarating experience. As I walked home, a proposal for Mountain Ink taking shape in my mind, I realized something. For 2 hours I hadn't thought about Arjun, the lawsuit, or the crash. I had been present. I had been Nisha Roy, designer. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I was no longer just dismantling my old life. I was architecting a new one. Brick by brick, client by client, thread by woven thread. The ghost was building a house with windows that looked toward the future. That night I checked the court portal. A new filing from Agarwal and Sons. Another motion to dismiss. Another attempt to stall. I closed the laptop. Let them file. Let him flail in the quicksand of his own making. My world was expanding, while his was shrinking to the confines of a legal docket and an empty apartment. The monsoon was beginning to retreat, leaving the world washed and glittering. I stood on the veranda, breathing in the clean air. The hollow inside me was still there, but it was no longer an abyss. It was a foundation. And on it I was finally, quietly building. The settlement offer arrived via courier, a thick, cream-colored envelope that felt like a tumor in my hands. My father brought it in from the gate, his face a storm cloud. Shall I burn it? He asked, only half joking. No, I said, my voice calm. Evidence. Inside, on his firm's letterhead, was a number so large it felt fictional. It represented a clean break, a signature, and my eternal silence. Along with it, a single handwritten line on a separate card. For the baby. For us. Please stop this. It was masterful, really. Invoking the ghost of our child to buy his peace. The cruelty of it was so vast it circled back to seeming like genuine, if grotesque, emotion. It was designed to break me. Did not break me. It turned my blood to glacial ice. I scanned every page and emailed it to Mrs. Mehta with a one-line note. Received. My answer is no. Her reply was instantaneous. I'll draft the formal rejection. Discovery phase is next. Be prepared. They will dig deeper. I was prepared. I had become a fortress, my emotions buried under layers of strategy and routine. My work with the Weavers Cooperative was launching to quiet acclaim. The website I'd built for them had already increased online inquiries by 300%. Ian's publishing house, Mountain Ink., had become my second anchor. Our professional relationship was a quiet, steady stream of collaborative energy. He was respectful, funny in a dry way, and never pushed beyond the boundaries of our work. In another life I might have been intrigued. In this one he was a safe harbor in a professional sense, and I clung to that safety. Then the world cracked open again. It was a Thursday. I was at the local market with my mother, selecting vegetables. The air was full of the smell of ripe fruit and rain-dusted earth. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Mehta. Nisha. Her voice was clipped, urgent. A tabloid. Mumbai Metro. They've run a story. It's bad. They have the accident details. They have the miscarriage. They're painting you as the unstable, grieving wife who abandoned her devoted husband after a shared tragedy. They quote anonymous close sources who talk about your reclusive behavior and emotional volatility. They've even dug up an old college photo of you looking pensive. The ground didn't sway. It hardened into concrete beneath my feet. So this was his new play. Trial by media. If he couldn't win in court, he'd poison the well of public opinion, pressure me into hiding, into settling. They're framing the divorce as you capitalizing on a tragedy, Mrs. Mehta continued, her fury a live wire. It's a character assassination and it's defamatory. We can sue the publication, but that's a long game. The immediate damage. Send me the link, I said, my voice detached. I found a quiet corner near a spice stall. The headline screamed, From Cradle to Court. Asu's tragedy as wife seeks fortune. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation. Arjun was the harried, heartbroken hero, photographed looking somber and dignified outside his office. I was a phantom represented by a grainy, unflattering picture. The anonymous sources were clearly Varun and his ilk. They mentioned my retreat to the hills, hinting at a nervous breakdown. The 55 calls were framed as a frantic, possibly confused series of attempts, while his absence was a tragic misunderstanding during a critical business negotiation. My mother read over my shoulder, her hand flying to her mouth. Beta, this is, how can they? It's him, I said, the ice in my veins spreading. He's orchestrating this. The walk home was silent. The familiar, friendly market now felt like a place where eyes might be watching, judging. The sanctuary of the hills felt violated. He had found a way to reach me, to smear my new world with the filth of the old one. At home I retreated to my room. The hollow inside me yawned wide, threatening to swallow the cold anger. I could feel the old pull. To curl into a ball, to disappear, to let the narrative win. To be the ghost he was trying to convince the world I was. I opened my laptop. I looked at the professional, serene Instagram profile of Nisha Roy Designs. Then I looked at the tabloid article, its venomous pixels glowing on the screen. A choice stood before me. I could retreat further, go completely offline, let Mrs. Mehta fight a legal battle against smoke. Or I could step out of the shadows. The memory of Anjali Devi's rough hands holding mine. You have sorrow in your eyes and fire in your hands. The fire one. I didn't post a rant. I didn't deny the allegations. I did something far more dangerous. I began to write. Not for a legal affidavit but for myself. I wrote about the sound of crushing metal. I wrote about the smell of blood and gasoline. I wrote about the desperate animal hope that clings to a ringing phone. I wrote about the sound of a laugh, bright and carefree while your world ends. I wrote about the silence of a hospital room, and the deeper silence of a wound that will never quicken again. I wrote about the kindness of a nurse named Sheila, and the feeling of cool mountain air on skin that felt newly born from tragedy. I wrote my truth. Raw, unvarnished, and utterly without accusation toward him by name. It was a story of survival, not blame. I didn't publish it. Not yet. The next day I am called. His usual easy warmth was gone, replaced by a tense concern. Nisha. I saw the trash in the metro. I'm so sorry. That's horrific. It's lies, I said, the words coming out more brittle than I intended. I never doubted that for a second, he replied, his conviction immediate and absolute. It was a lifeline. Listen, Mountain Ink's rebrand launches next week. The event is small, local publishers, authors, some press. We'd planned to showcase the new design work. Given this, would you still be comfortable attending? As our lead designer, I want to show you off, frankly. But only if you feel safe. He was offering me a platform. A legitimate, respectable one. Not to fight but to stand. To be seen as a professional, a creator, not a tabloid phantom. My instinct was to refuse to hide. But the fire pushed back. "I'll be there," I heard myself say. The day of the event, I dressed with a care I hadn't exercised in months. A simple, elegant raw silk sari in a deep forest green, one of my mother's. No jewelry except my grandmother's thin gold bangles. I pulled my hair back. My face in the mirror was thinner, older, with shadows under my eyes that no concealer could mask. But my gaze was steady. The event was at a small, book-filled gallery. As I entered on Ian's arm, a gesture of professional solidarity, a few heads turned. Whispers rustled like dry leaves. The metro had a wider reach than I'd hoped. Ian didn't flinch. He introduced me to everyone with palpable pride. "This is Nisha Roy, the brilliant mind behind our new look. Her work with the Women's Weavers Cooperative is revolutionizing their digital presence." He anchored me in achievement, not scandal. I talked about design philosophy, about color theory, about storytelling through visuals. My voice didn't shake. I was in my element. For an hour I was just a designer. Then I saw him. Across the room, near a display of Himalayan poetry, stood a man with a camera and a predatory stillness. He wasn't dressed for the literary crowd. I felt his lens focus on me like a physical touch. Paparazzi. Sent by the metro, or by Arjun himself, to get a picture of the unstable, reclusive wife. A cold sweat broke out on my spine. The old panic, the feeling of being hunted, surged. I wanted to bolt. Ian followed my gaze. His hand, resting lightly on my back for a conversational moment, gave a gentle, reassuring press. "Ignore him," he murmured. "He's a vulture. Don't give him the shot he wants." But what was the shot he wanted? A woman cowering, hiding her face, looking emotionally volatile? The ice returned. I turned slightly, not away from the camera but offering a better angle. I leaned in to examine a book's cover design, a small, genuine smile on my face as I pointed something out to the author next to me. I was engaged, professional, normal. The polar opposite of the tabloid phantom. I could feel the photographer's frustration. He clicked a few times, then lowered his camera, scowling. He'd gotten nothing he could use. Later, as the event wound down, Ian brought me a cup of tea. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "That took steel." "It took not wanting to let him win," I corrected, sipping the hot, sweet liquid. The him being your husband?" I looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't asking with gossipy curiosity, but with a quiet, focused concern. I owed him some truth. "Yes. The article is his doing. The photographer likely is too." Ian's jaw tightened. "Then he's a fool. And a coward." He paused. "The design world here is small, but it's tight-knit. Your work is speaking for itself loudly. No sleazy tabloid can change that. You have allies here, Nisha. Remember that." That night, back in the safety of my room, I logged onto my professional blog, a dormant space I'd never used. I took the piece I had written, My Truth. I titled it simply, On Silence and Sound. I prefaced it with a short note. In response to recent speculative stories, here is mine. Not for sympathy but for clarity. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't promote it. I just hit publish, and let it exist in the world. Then I took the one personal photo I allowed myself. A picture of the view from my veranda, the mountains shrouded in twilight mist, strong and silent. I posted it on my professional Instagram. The caption was a single line from the blog. "The deepest silences are not empty. They are full of answers." I turned off my phone and slept, not peacefully but without dreams. In the morning, the world had shifted. My blog post had been shared, first by the Weavers Cooperative, then by Mountain Ink, then by other small businesses and design pages. The comments weren't all kind, but they were overwhelmingly supportive. Courageous. Heartbreaking. This is the power of design, to reshape your own narrative. Mrs. Mehta called, her voice buzzing with a different energy. "The tabloid has taken down the online article. No retraction yet, but it's a retreat. Your post, it changed the conversation. The court of public opinion is a fickle beast, but you just presented evidence it couldn't ignore. Well done." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and scraped raw. But I also felt something else, fragile and new. a sense of agency. I had been the uninvited guest in his narrative. Now I had written my own. A message notification popped up on my screen. It was from Ian. Not about work. A picture of a first edition of a book on Himalayan flora he thought I'd like, with a note. For your veranda library. A small token for standing your ground. You reminded a lot of people what strength looks like today. I looked at the message, then out at the mountains, emerging clear and sharp from the retreating mist. Arjun had tried to bury me under a landslide of lies. Instead, he had only succeeded in compacting the earth beneath my feet, making it solid enough to finally stand upon. The ghost was gone. In her place stood a woman, scarred and hollowed but visible. And she was just beginning to speak. Winter in Dehradun was a gentle affair, a crispness in the air that sharpened the scent of pine and wood smoke. The magnolia tree under which I'd buried the tiny booties stood bare, its skeletal branches etched against a sky the color of faded denim. Inside me the season echoed. The initial violent storms of grief and fury had passed, leaving a landscape quiet and hard with frost. It was in this stillness that the real work began. Not the reactive fight for survival, but the deliberate, patient act of rebuilding a self. My blog post had created a subtle but undeniable ripple. New client inquiries mentioned it, not with pity, but with a respectful acknowledgement. We admire your clarity, one email said. I was no longer just a designer. I was a designer with a story of resilience which, in the world of branding, was a potent asset. I hired a part-time virtual assistant, a sharp young woman from Chennai named Lata, to manage inquiries and my growing schedule. The sound of business, the ping of emails, the soft click of invoices being generated, was a new kind of music. Ian became a constant, steady presence. Our conversations, once strictly confined to font choices and print margins, began to meander. He'd drop by the house under the pretext of discussing a book cover, often bearing a bag of freshly roasted peanuts from the bazaar or a rare orchid for my mother. He talked to my father about military history, listened to my mother's stories of her garden, and treated me with a careful, unwavering normalcy that was itself a kind of healing. He never asked about Mumbai, about the accident, about Arjun. He simply created a space where those things didn't have to exist. One afternoon, we were reviewing the final proofs for Mountain Ink's spring catalog on the veranda. Sunlight, pale and winter-thin, filtered through the vines. This series on forgotten Himalayan folk tales, I said, tracing a proof illustration with my finger. The artwork is beautiful, but the layout feels safe. These stories are wild, full of trickster spirits and vengeful mountains. The design should have a hint of that danger. Ian leaned back in his chair, studying me. Danger. That's a word I haven't heard from a designer before. They usually want elegant or impactful. What does dangerous design look like to you, Nisha? I thought of the stark, clean lines I was drawn to now, the unexpected contrasts, the way I'd begun to use negative space not just as emptiness, but as a character itself. It looks like truth, I found myself saying. Not pretty truth. Necessary truth. It should unsettle just a little before it resolves. He was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, you've just described your own work. The observation hung in the air, warm and unthreatening. It wasn't flattery, it was recognition. I felt seen not as a victim or a fighter but as an artist. A flush crept up my neck, unrelated to the chill. The legal war, meanwhile, had settled into a grim, positional trench warfare. Mrs. Mehta's updates were now more tactical than catastrophic. Arjun's side, stung by the failure of the media blitz, was now fighting over assets with a petulant, granular ferocity. They contested the value of every piece of art, every stick of furniture. They even tried to claim my grandmother's bangles as marital gift, and thus a shared asset. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. Each of these skirmishes cost him a fortune in legal fees and, I hoped, another shred of his soul. I was no longer directly engaged in that battle. I had delegated it. My focus was here, on the life I was grafting onto the scarred stump of the old one. The graft took a tangible form when Anjali Devi from the Weavers Cooperative asked for a meeting. In the cozy, yarn-filled back room of their studio, she poured chai and got straight to the point. The new website, the orders, it is a blessing. But it is also a storm. We are weavers, not packers and shippers. We are drowning in success. That's a good problem to have, I smiled. Only if you can swim, child. We need to build a system. A proper business. We were thinking we need a partner. Not an employee. A partner who understands the vision, who can build the structure around the beauty. Her old, bright eyes held mine. We want it to be you. The offer was staggering. It meant equity. It meant roots. It meant co-creating a future, not just designing its facade. I don't know the first thing about running a full business, Anjali Devi. Logistics, supply chains, HR. We know the weaving, she said firmly. You know how to make the world see its value. We will learn the rest together. You have a strategic mind. We have seen it. You plan your moves like a chess player. He saw that too. The comment resonated. My life had become a series of calculated moves. But this one wasn't about defense. It was about creation. I accepted. The news seemed to travel on the mountain air. A few days later, Ian proposed a collaboration. A limited edition series of books from Mountain Ink, hand-bound in fabrics from the Weavers Cooperative, with design and curation by me. It was a perfect confluence, a tangible knot tying my new world together. That evening, working late on the partnership agreement at the dining table, my father sat down opposite me. He pushed a small file toward me. I've been doing some digging, he said, his voice low. Through an old contact. On the mistress. Riya Sharma. My pencil stilled. I hadn't said her name aloud since the hospital. I hadn't wanted to give her the solidity of a name. She was a laugh, a voice, a sapphire blue dress. She's not some secretary or model, my father continued, his face grim. She's the daughter of Sanjay Sharma. Of Sharma Holdings. I knew the name. A rival business family. Older money slightly fraying at the edges. Arjun's affair wasn't just a tawdry dalliance. It was a potential business alliance or a calculated pivot. Had he been planning to trade up? Was I not just emotionally but financially inconvenient? The cold analysis was automatic now. The affair, my father said, reading my thoughts, seems to have gone cold after the accident became public. The Sharma family is traditional. A public scandal with a married man, especially one now entangled in a vicious divorce, is not the match they'd want for their daughter. He's lost that play too. So he was left with nothing. No wife, no child, no powerful mistress, just a draining legal battle and a reputation cracking like old varnish. A profound emptiness opened inside me, but it wasn't pity. It was the vast, quiet space where vengeance finally exhales and finds it is not enough. His suffering would never give me back what I lost. I closed the file. Thank you, Papa. But I don't need to know more. She's irrelevant. He nodded, a look of deep pride in his eyes. You're moving beyond it. I'm trying to. The true test of that came with the first frost. Ian invited me to a small, informal gathering at his cottage on the outskirts of town. A potluck with a few local artists and writers. A social event, purely personal. My first. I stood in front of my wardrobe, a familiar panic rising. Who was I in this context? The survivor? The designer? The divorcee? I chose a simple heavy wool tunic and trousers, clothes that felt like armor and comfort both. Ian's cottage was a warm chaos of books and kilim rugs. The people there were like him, creative, engaged, kind. They talked about obscure films, the ethics of translation, the best trail for spotting Himalayan pheasants. No one asked probing questions. I listened, sipping mulled wine, my contributions hesitant at first, then growing steadier. A woman, a ceramicist with paint under her nails, turned to me. Ian says you're the reason my book on local glazes doesn't look like a pharmaceutical manual. Thank you. I laughed, a real, uncalculated sound that surprised me. The glazes did all the work. I just got out of their way. Later, as I helped Ian refill the snack bowls in his cramped kitchen, our shoulders brushed. We both stilled for a second. The air in the kitchen was warm from the oven close. You're doing okay? He asked softly, his gaze searching my face. I am, I said, and for the first time it wasn't a defiance or a hope. It was a statement of fact. Tonight is nice. Normal. You deserve nice and normal, he said. And extraordinary. You deserve quiet evenings and wild successes and everything in between. His words were a balm and a spark. I looked up at him, at the genuine warmth in his eyes, and felt a terrifying, thrilling lurch. Not of love, not yet, but of possibility. The possibility of a connection that wasn't born from trauma, but from shared passion and quiet, growing regard. On the drive home, the stars were a fierce, cold glitter above the black outlines of the mountains. My phone buzzed in my purse. An email notification. From Arjun's lawyer. Final settlement conference. Mrs. Mehta had pushed for one last attempt at mediation before a costly public trial. The timing felt like a cosmic joke. Just as I was tasting a new kind of air, the past reached up to tug at my ankle. I didn't open the email that night. I lay in bed watching the moon cast skeletal tree shadows on my wall. I thought of Ian's kitchen, the brush of wool on wool, the feeling of being seen for my present, not defined by my past. I thought of the weaver's partnership, a future built with my own hands. And I thought of Arjun, frozen in the hospital corridor, frozen in the consequences of his choices. He was a statue in a museum of my former life. I was no longer a visitor there. The grafting was taking. New shoots, tender but determined, were growing over the old, dead wood. They were susceptible to frost, to a sudden storm. But they were alive. And for the first time since the crushing silence of the car, I wanted fiercely to see what they would become. The mediation was in 2 weeks. In Mumbai. I would have to go back. Not as a ghost but as the architect I had become. The thought no longer filled me with dread. It was just the next necessary move in a game I was no longer playing just to survive, but to win my future. The Mumbai air hit me like a physical blow, thick, humid, and freighted with a million memories. It didn't smell of home, it smelled of exhaust, ambition, and old pain. As the taxi crawled from the airport towards the lawyer's offices in Nariman Point, the city scrolled by like a traumatic flashback. The cafe where we had our first date. The cinema where he'd held my hand during a scary movie. The boutique where I'd once seen a sapphire blue dress and thought it would look lovely on me. I wore my own armor. A tailored ivory linen pantsuit, my hair in a severe but elegant knot, my grandmother's bangles the only jewelry. I looked professional, impenetrable, successful. Nothing like the broken woman who had fled. In my leather portfolio was not just the legal paperwork, but the latest reports from the Weavers Cooperative and the mock-ups for Mountain Ink's special edition. My talismans. Mrs. Mehta greeted me in a conference room that was all cold glass and a view of the relentless sea. "You look well," she said, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Strong." "I am," I replied, and it was true. "He's already here. In the adjoining room with his counsel. They're nervous. The judge has made it clear she has no patience for delaying tactics. The discovery phase did not go well for them. Your documentation was comprehensive." A faint smile touched her lips. "Remember, you are under no obligation to speak to him directly. This is a negotiation between legal teams. You are here to observe and to make the final decision on any offer." I took a steadying breath. "I understand." We entered the main mediation room. It was smaller than I'd imagined, dominated by a long teak table. And there he was. Seeing him was like encountering a stranger I'd once known intimately in a nightmare. He was still handsome, but it was a ravaged handsomeness. He'd lost too much weight. His suit hung slightly loose on his frame. Shadows pooled under his eyes and new lines bracketed his mouth, etched not by laughter but by tension. His gaze, when it snapped to me, was a shockwave of conflicting emotions. Stark relief, instant guilt, a flash of old possessiveness, and finally a bewildered awe. I was not what he expected. I didn't freeze. I didn't flinch. I gave him a small, polite nod as if acknowledging a distant acquaintance, and took the seat Mrs. Mehta indicated opposite him. The distance across the table felt like a chasm carved by years, not months. His lawyer, a man with the slick demeanor of a car salesman, began with a tone of forced conciliation. Mrs. Mehta was a glacier, unmoved. They talked numbers, assets, timelines. It was a drone of legalese. I kept my eyes on the horizon line of the Arabian Sea, visible through the window. But I could feel Arjun's stare, a physical heat on my skin. He was desperate, searching for a crack in my composure. During a break, as the lawyers huddled over a clause, he finally broke. His voice when he spoke my name was rough. "Nisha." I turned my head slowly, meeting his gaze. "You look," he trailed off, unable to find a word that fit. "I am well, thank you," I said, my voice cool and even. All of this," he gestured weakly at the room. "It's a madness. We don't have to do this. We can still walk out of here together. Just talk. The audacity was breathtaking. The reduction of our cataclysm to a need for talk. I saw in his eyes that he truly believed it was possible, that his remorse, however belated, was a currency I should accept. There is nothing to talk about, Arjun, I said, not unkindly, but with a finality that left no room for argument. We are here to divide a corpse. Let the lawyers handle it. He flinched as if struck. A corpse. Our marriage. Our life. The life you ended, I clarified, still calm. On a Tuesday afternoon, while choosing between sapphire and crimson. All color drained from his face. The mention of the dresses, the specific damning detail, was a direct hit. He looked down at his hands clenched on the table. I think about it every day. Every second. The what-ifs, they're killing me. Good, I said, the word leaving my lips before I could censure it. It was the first raw thing I'd said. Then you have some small idea of what the reality felt like. He looked up, his eyes swimming with a pain I now believed was genuine, but it was too late. His pain was his own. It had no connection to me anymore. I would give anything to go back, he whispered, a broken man confessing. I wouldn't, I said and meant it. The woman I had been was gone. I did not wish for her return, for her ignorant happiness. I preferred the clarity of the frost, even with its biting cold. The mediation resumed. His side, perhaps sensing his crumbling focus, became more belligerent. They made a lowball offer, insulting in its pettiness. Mrs. Mehta didn't blink. She slid a counter-proposal across the table. A figure that accounted for my financial contributions, the projected value of my sacrificed career growth, and a significant lump sum for emotional distress, backed by the call logs and the doctor's testimony. It was a staggering number. This is outrageous, his lawyer spluttered. This is punitive. It is commensurate with the damage, Mrs. Mehta said icily. My client has the evidence to support every claim. We are prepared to present it in vivid detail in open court. The press, I'm sure, would find the narrative of the 55 calls particularly compelling. The threat hung in the air. Arjun wasn't looking at his lawyer, he was looking at me. He saw my stillness, my absolute resolve. He saw a woman who would indeed walk into a courtroom and lay bare his annihilation of her, piece by piece, without shedding a tear. The cost to his reputation already frayed would be incalculable. I need to speak with my client, his lawyer said, standing. They left the room. The silence they left behind was profound. Mrs. Mehta turned to me. He'll take it. He's broken. He just needs his lawyer to convince him it's the least bad option. 20 minutes later they returned. Arjun looked like a man who had agreed to his own execution. His voice was a monotone. We accept the terms. There were papers to sign, initial formalities. My hand was steady as I wrote my name. Nisha Roy. Not Nisha A. Roy. Just me. It was over. The legal tethers were cut. As we gathered our things, Arjun approached me one last time. His lawyers hovered nervously. What will you do now? He asked, the question pathetic in its longing. I will live, I said simply. I have a business partnership in Dehradun. A design studio. A life. The words were daggers. He had expected a wreck, a hollow shell pining for him. Instead, I was a CEO, an artist, a partner. I was everything he'd never bothered to see. I'm glad, he choked out, the lie transparent. I didn't call him on it. I simply nodded again, that polite, final nod, and turned to leave. Nisha. The cry was torn from him. I paused at the door, not turning fully. The baby, our son. I never even. I looked over my shoulder, meeting his devastated gaze one last time. He wasn't yours to lose, I said, my voice barely a whisper but carrying across the silent room. He was mine. And I have mourned him. You mourn the idea. They are not the same. I walked out, Mrs. Mehta a solid presence at my side. I didn't look back. The elevator doors closed, sealing away that chapter of my life with a soft, decisive shush. Back in the taxi, heading to the airport for the first flight back to the hills, the expected collapse didn't come. I didn't cry or shake. I felt light. The anchor of his presence, even as an adversary, was gone. The skyline of Mumbai, his kingdom, receded in the rearview mirror, just a glittering monument to a past life. My phone buzzed. A message from Ian. No words. Just a picture of the first snow dusting the peaks above his cottage, catching the morning sun. A silent welcome back to the world I was choosing. And then another message from an unknown number. But I knew. You won. I hope it makes you happy. I will never stop being sorry. I stared at it. The apology 3 months too late, a lifetime too late. It held no power, no warmth. It was just words sent into the void. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply. I simply saved the contact under a single, fitting name, the past. I put my phone away and watched the urban sprawl give way to the open road. The revenge was complete. I had taken his money, his peace, his narrative. I had left him frozen in the permanent winter of his regret. But as the plane lifted off, carrying me away from the city of ghosts, I realized the victory felt hollow in a new way. It was done. And now there was only the future. A future I had built with my own scarred hands in the clean, quiet mountains. A future where the man waiting there asked for nothing, but offered a view of snowy peaks and the quiet, steady possibility of something that was not love yet, but felt like the promise of morning after a long, long night. Spring in the mountains is a rebellion. It is not a gentle unfurling but a vigorous, insistent push through the last crusts of frost. Color erupts where you least expect it. Brave yellow primroses at the edge of a snowdrift, the fiery red of rhododendron buds against slate-gray rock. My first Dehradun spring mirrored this violent, beautiful insistence. The settlement money landed in my account with a sterile digital chime. A number so large it felt abstract. I used the first chunk to buy a small, sun-drenched studio space downtown. A place with white walls and wide windows that looked onto a courtyard struggling with a bougainvillea. Nisha Roy Designs and Company. The sign read, The and Company, a nod to my partnership with the weavers. It was a physical anchor for my new life, smelling of fresh paint and possibility. The legal war was over. The silence from Mumbai was absolute and finally peaceful. Arjun was a closed book on a shelf I no longer visited. My energy, once coiled tight around survival and strategy, now flowed unimpeded into creation. The collaborative project with Mountain Ink and the Weavers was consuming me in the best way. I was curating folk tales, matching them to specific weaves and dyes, designing custom typography that felt both ancient and modern. Ian and I spent long hours in my new studio or his book-crammed cottage, heads bent over layouts, our debates lively and productive. One such evening as we worked past dusk, a sudden torrential spring shower lashed the windows. The power flickered and died, plunging us into a darkness softened only by the emergency light of our laptops. Well, Ian sighed, his face a play of shadows. I suppose that's a sign. A sign we should call it a night? I asked, saving my work. A sign, he said, his voice quieter, that maybe we should stop working for a bit. I have a candle around here somewhere. He rustled in a drawer and a moment later, a match flared, illuminating his focused expression as he lit a thick beeswax candle. The warm, honeyed light pushed back the dark, carving out a small, intimate world in the center of the room. He poured us 2 glasses of water from a pitcher, the sound loud in the quiet. We sat on the floor, leaning against his sofa, the storm raging outside. The launch is in 3 weeks, I said, staring at the candle flame. I'm not nervous about the work. It's the best work I've ever done. But, he prompted gently. But it's so personal. These stories feel like they're woven with my own threats now. Putting them out there, it feels like standing on a stage naked. He was silent for a moment. I think, he said slowly, the best art always is. It's just that most people are clever at disguising it. You've stopped disguising things. That's your power now, Nisha. It's also what makes you feel exposed. His understanding was a profound comfort. He saw the mechanics of my heart as clearly as he saw the mechanics of good design. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate. For what? For not treating me like I'm made of glass. For seeing the work first. For this. I gestured at the candlelit bubble around us, the storm outside. His eyes held mine in the flickering light. The air between us, always charged with a creative frisson, now hummed with a different, more potent energy. I felt the pull, the terrifying, delicious possibility of leaning forward, of closing the gap. And I froze. Not with the old, traumatic freezing, but with the hesitation of someone standing at the edge of a high dive, looking down at deep, inviting water after a long drought. My body remembered the last time I'd trusted, the last time I'd leaned in. The memory was a ghost touch, a whisper of betrayal that tightened my chest. I saw it. He saw the shadow cross my face, the slight stiffening of my shoulders. He didn't pull back in offense. He didn't press forward. He simply gave a small, understanding nod, as if acknowledging a shared truth about the weather. "The rain's letting up," he observed softly, his gaze never leaving mine. "The roads will be treacherous. You should stay until it passes properly. I can make up the guest room." It was an offer of sanctuary, not pressure. A retreat that felt like a step forward. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. "I'd like that," I whispered. I slept in his guest room that night, under a quilt made by one of the weavers. I listened to the last patters of rain on the roof, and for the first time in a year, my last thought before sleep wasn't of loss or strategy. It was of the gentle, respectful warmth in a man's eyes as he lit a candle against the dark. The launch event was held in my studio, transformed into a gallery. The hand-bound books lay in carved wooden cradles, each swathed in its unique woven fabric. The folk tales were printed on handmade paper. It was a tactile, sensual celebration of story and craft. The place was packed. Local artists, journalists from niche publications, clients, friends of the cooperative. I wore a sari woven by Anjali Devi herself, a complex pattern of charcoal gray and a shock of primrose yellow, the colors of my personal spring. I gave a short speech. My voice didn't shake. I talked about the intersection of stories and craft, about resilience, about beauty born from utility. I did not mention my past. It was irrelevant to this creation. Afterwards, as people mingled, sipping local rhododendron wine, Ian found me by the window. "You," he said, his eyes shining, "were magnificent. Completely in your element." "We did it," I smiled, the joy pure and unadulterated. "To many more collaborations," he said, raising his glass. "To collaboration," I echoed. Later, as the crowd thinned, a familiar figure entered, hesitating at the door. My father in his best blazer, my mother beaming beside him in a bright silk sari. They had driven down quietly, wanting to surprise me. The sight of them, their faces glowing with pride, was the final stitch in the tapestry of the evening. My mother hugged me, whispering, "My strong, brilliant girl." My father simply squeezed my shoulder, his eyes suspiciously bright. In the quiet aftermath, as Ian and my parents chatted, I stepped outside into the courtyard. The bougainvillea was a riot of purple against the white wall. The air was cool and sweet. My phone, relegated to a drawer for the evening, buzzed once in my pocket. A news alert. I almost dismissed it, but the headline caught my eye. "Rising Texio Arjun Roy steps down amidst boardroom shuffle." I clicked the link. It was a dry, corporate article. Personal reasons were cited. The board thanked him for his service and wished him well in his future endeavors. There was no scandal mentioned, no mention of me. It was a quiet, professional euthanasia. His kingdom, the one he'd chosen over a ringing phone, had finally found him dispensable. I felt no schadenfreude. Only a quiet, conclusive click, like the sound of a heavy door locking in a distant wing of a house I no longer lived in. I deleted the alert. "Everything okay?" Ian had followed me out. He stood a few feet away, giving me space. I turned to him, the phone forgotten in my hand. "Everything," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being, "is perfectly okay." He came to stand beside me, looking up at the stars beginning to pierce the velvet sky. "It's a good night." "It is." The space between our hands on the cool railing was infinitesimal. This time the ghost of the past did not whisper. The memory of betrayal was overlaid with the memory of his kindness in the candlelight, his respect, his shared passion. The fear was still there, a small, cold stone in my stomach. But beside it now was a warmth, a pull stronger than the fear. I took a breath, the scent of rain-washed earth and night-blooming jasmine filling my lungs. Then slowly, deliberately I shifted my hand. My pinky finger brushed against his. He went utterly still. Not frozen but poised. Waiting. I turned my hand, sliding my fingers to interlace with his. His skin was warm, his grip firm but gentle, as if holding something precious and wild. He didn't look at me. He kept his gaze on the stars, but a smile, slow and deep, spread across his face. He gave my hand a single, affirming squeeze. We stood there in the silent courtyard under the vast star-strewn sky, hand in hand. The past was a country far behind me, its borders sealed. The future was a path veiled in mist, but for the first time I was not walking it alone. The revenge was complete, but it was not my monument. My monument was this studio, these friendships, this work, this tentative, brave clasp of hands in the gathering dark. The long winter was over. The ice in my veins had melted, not into a helpless flood, but into a clear, strong river, carving its own course through the landscape of my new life. I was no longer a ghost, an architect, or a survivor. I was simply Nisha. And I was finally beginning. The end.